Week 17 is, of course, a hot button issue across all of best ball. But how do you specifically use it in your drafts? When do you factor it in? When do you look to other elements? And maybe how do you implement specific stacks and other different variables as it relates to the fantasy playoffs and specifically week 17? How do we best draft teams with these kind of concepts in mind? That's what we're going to cover here today on Legendary Sickos, a legendary upside and spike week crossover. Let's do it.
Three, two, one, liftoff.
So, Pat, we wanted to talk again about kind of some week 17 stuff, and it's very difficult to intro a week 17 conversation, especially when you've talked about it a bunch without sounding redundant. Like, hey, we're going to talk about week 17 again. But you sent me ahead of time. I assume by the time that this gets posted, your latest article will already be out. And I think while it is again some conversation about the fantasy playoffs, right, and week 17 and upside and correlation and everything, I think there's a lot of really interesting angles and some ways we can think about these things, or maybe ways other people aren't thinking about these things, actually, is probably the better way to view it, that can really impact like how we draft. And in this specific piece, you outlined like a specific draft or some specific drafts and some specific kind of levers that we can pull. And just how I would almost define it is we try to like be really like specific in draft strategy, right? Do this or do that, or here's what zero running back means, here's what this means. When in reality, like you're just weighing like 8 different things every time you come on the clock, like later in the draft, like the first couple rounds, whatever. But like by round 9, there's like 10 different things that anyone that has kind of developed a skill for drafting is weighing. And I think we talk about it a lot through like week 17 and stuff, but week 17 is something that plays into those things. And I think we can dive into like, you get on the clock in round 9, dude, and there's like a bunch of picks who like are probably all viable. How the heck do you pick one? You know, like who's the best pick? And kind of wading through that, I think, is a fun conversation.
Yeah, so I ended up writing this piece, which will be out by the time you're listening to this. And yeah, it's kind of I decided to write it after seeing some of the conversation on Twitter. One of the tweet that kind of kicked this off was Adam Levitan had a tweet where he was saying like, basically, week 17 correlation is important. He believes in it, but it's not one of the top 5 things he's considering while on the clock and or thinking about. And that I think is like a fair framing. And it also kind of kicked off a number of other tweets where people were saying, here's like my list of things that I think
Yeah.
about, and so like that was kind of the topic of conversation a little bit. What I would say, and kind of why I decided to write the article, is like, if you're like getting up to speed on best ball specifically, and you're kind of, a little bit newer to sort of the best ball fundamentals, which Adam laid out in his tweet. He said roster construction, stacking, ADP, player ranks / takes, and positional capital, all more important in terms of things he's thinking about when on the clock than week 17 correlation. If you're still like making sure you're like hitting those fundamentals, I call them the blocking and tackling of fake football in the piece, then, I think you do need to be thinking about those things more than thinking about week 17 correlation. But this is a show called Legendary Sickos. So we're going to go ahead and assume that maybe you've drafted a bunch of teams and, or at least you're curious about what, we're thinking about having drafted a bunch of teams. And so the article is kind of laying out that my position on this is that if you feel comfortable with the fundamentals, then you may not be thinking about week 17 correlation enough. And so, let's go ahead and tilt Adam, who was clearly a little tired of the week 17 conversation, wants to put it to bed. No, we're bringing it back up. We're saying, no, it's in fact, it's underrated. Week 17 is actually still underrated.
I feel bad, by the way, for people that are sick of week 17 talk, because it is May 17th, buddy.
Yeah.
You got a lot more.
Get
If
ready,
you
buddy.
can't handle it yet, you are in for a long, like, log off for the next 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote this whole article basically saying, I think, again, provided that you feel comfortable with the fundamentals, then you probably should be thinking about it more than you think. And I got into a specific draft in which I like outlined kind of what I was thinking at various parts of the draft. In certain parts, in like the round like 4 through 6 range, I was really just thinking about structure. I kind of lucked into a nice little mini correlation to start. I did a Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack, reached a little to get that Allen pair. But then Ramondre Stevenson fell to me at the 310. So, like, that's a no brainer. And also he correlated. But then I didn't really think about correlation for a while. I had to think about structure. I was behind schedule at wide receiver. That became my primary concern. But what I kind of go into in the draft is that in the article in general is that, like, we're actually trying to weigh a number of things. Not all of them are in agreement with each other. You might have a player that you really like at one position. You might have a huge ADP value at another position, but your structure is calling for something else. How do you weigh all of those things? And as long as you're comfortable with sort of how much weight to give those things, correlation comes in as like an extremely handy tiebreaker to put you on, otherwise, like, I think you could just kind of end up building a lot of the same team, because what ends up happening naturally is you're like, well, in this situation, I prefer to do this. And you kind of just do the same thing over and over. Or these 3 players, I tend to pick this guy, I'm just going to pick him again. And your exposures are out of whack, which I think is another thing correlation can help with. So, yeah, the tiebreaker element of correlation, I think, is something that allows it to almost operate alongside the best ball fundamentals and point you in the direction, rather than just, being another one of those things that you have to think about.
How do you think about setting aside week 17 for just a couple of seconds? So if someone is listening and they're like, yeah, I've drafted quite a few best ball teams. I understand structures, right? I understand I don't want to reach 3 rounds on players. I understand I don't want to draft 5 quarterbacks and those kind of things. But something I've always you called it the blocking and tackling. Like, a lot of those things are what I have typically called, like, that's the ante to the game, right? You sit down and you're playing poker. You don't get to play if you don't put the ante in. And all that is really doing,
you do get to play. You're just not gonna you're not gonna do all that well.
Yeah, exactly. But so you're it's basically like, are you going to be the rake or not, right? So this is, again, I'd make way too many like DFS parallels, but think of any like peer-to-peer gambling or sports speculation or whatever, right? Go play anything. If you don't have the basics, the very basic things down there, and there are always going to be people that enter these tournaments and do not have the basics down, right? Those are the people we would call paying the rake. There's always an X percentage of people in newer, which a best ball kind of is, newer, less efficient, nobody really has the game solved. There's going to be more of those people, right? Because they're just naturally less people understand how to do the very basic things correctly. We could also argue in best ball, we're still figuring out exactly, like, we know, roster construction and some of that basic stuff, but like, it was just last year that most people didn't even agree on week 17, right? And so what in 5 years are we going to be talking about that we look back on and laugh? But you have these basic things, and like, if you are like trying to figure out as a fairly experienced drafter, but maybe, you can't on the clock, right, say, oh my God, okay, this guy, you have the situation that you just outlined, which this happens a lot, actually. You're like, okay, I need wide receivers because my team says I need wide receivers, but I'm in the 7th round and this running back is 2.5 rounds past ADP. And, and then let's say he doesn't correlate, right? And like, when do we, and maybe I like him, maybe I have him ranked higher, right? So we're using all those things on the totem pole, and he's not my 6th running back in 7th round, right? It's my 3rd running back or something. It's okay. Like, my structure air quote structure is not getting thrown off because I can still just not draft that many running backs. But like, how would you just like kind of frame that exercise in terms of how do I tackle that problem? Because that's a big problem that like everyone has. And everybody just says like, oh, well, look at your rankings, right? Like, look at your rankings. Let's start on this totem pole that like Levitan was saying. I'm not saying rankings are at the top or whatever, but like, okay, how, right? Structure says one thing, ranking says another thing, correlation says another thing. This and there's 5 different competing things on this one pick. How do I go about starting to tackle that problem?
Yeah, no, I think that's like exactly. And so I guess what I would say is like, if one thing is just correlation, then that's the thing that you do want to kind of ignore, because it's not, I mean, not in every single case, but that's where in the list, like correlation would be the lowest thing. Like you don't want to just say, well, this guy correlates, so I'm taking him, even though I hate his guts and he's a reach,
Yeah,
and it
right,
doesn't
right.
help my structure. And there's other things that I should be doing with this pick, right?
Side
That's
note,
a
it just
mistake.
reminded me of one thing. I'm seeing it not necessarily through this exact same lens, but it just reminded me of the Derrick Henry hype we've slowly started to see. And that is my week 17 issue that I foresee for this summer, is people being like, well, Derrick Henry plays the Texans twice
Oh, I hadn't
in
heard.
the playoffs. And then dude, it happened on schedule release day. Somebody was in our Discord, not calling anybody out, but they were like, oh my God, I have no Derrick Henry. He plays the Texans. I'm like, this is literally the problem with week 17, is that you're thinking about it already like, oh my God, I don't have Derrick Henry. I have to get some. And then somebody posted Derrick Henry's game log history against the Texans, in reply to me, like, what do you think about this, dummy? And I'm like, God damn it. Like 4 months, 4 months of hearing Derrick Henry against the Texans, game logs is what we have to look forward to. But that's the thing is, right, if it's just you're like, oh my God, week 17, it's just that, then I think we're getting out ahead of ourselves. And there's going to be a lot of examples of that. It can be easy to fall into that trap, right? Like
For
it
sure.
seems good, like Derrick Henry against that, or it seems good to get the correlation, but like, it's just never that simple.
Right. And you have to think, we talked about this last time, but it's kind of, you're pulling a lever that helps you in the finals. And in the same way that drafting rookies would help you probably, in the finals relative to veterans. But if you just draft rookies, draft only rookies, you're not going anywhere. And like, it is also, I tend to think through things like, if there's like a gross veteran type of play who I especially don't like, then am I really going to bet on that guy in week 17 on New Year's Eve next year? That's, like, I'm already like, I don't know how much this guy has left. So I'm going to say, but he's a perfect fit for New Year's Eve of next year. It's like, we're not going to be very good at predicting exactly what happens next year, but we do know which teams play each other. And so we want to say,
Right.
all right, well, at least I've made a bet on this game. And if this game goes off and there's points in this game, then, I'm going to stand to benefit from that relative to the rest of the field. I'll bring up an example that I used in the article that I think kind of helps talk through some of the ways that, I kind of think through correlation. So in round 9, in round 9, I needed a wide receiver 5 in this draft. That's something that, Pete Overzet has pointed out about the winning lineups last year. 5 wide receivers through 9 rounds being a key element. Hayden Winks found that 5 to 6 wide receivers through 10 rounds was optimal last year. So structure was saying wide receiver 5 would be pretty good here. And I had this Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Ramondre Stevenson stack built out. I'm already betting on that game. Juju Smith-Schuster was sitting there. Okay. He's a bit of a reach, Juju, but he fits that game. But I don't like Juju. And I don't think he's a very good bet, for week 17. And he's not a value. And Cortland Sutton was also there, who he's not a huge target for me. I mean, he's certainly a risky pick as well, but I have him 16 spots ahead of Juju in my rankings right now. So like, this was not a particularly close. I wouldn't say the correlation was a tiebreaker. And this is where I think correlation, maybe people aren't thinking about it enough, because I also had Mike Williams on this team.
Mm.
So guess who benefits from correlation as well as Juju? Cortland Sutton. I now have a Broncos Chargers mini correlation. That's what I went with. I went with that because I'm still benefiting from week 17 correlation. I'm building out additional week 17 correlation. Just because I already have this one stack does not mean I need to just build only around that one stack. I can continue building out these minis. Now, in round 10, I just got Sutton. So Russell Wilson is sitting there. So now I can make that Russell Wilson to Cortland Sutton to Mike Williams as a bringback. So now I get a second full game stack. The only problem is I spent a second round pick on Josh Allen, and Russell Wilson would be a giant reach in terms of ADP, even though Sutton I got at an ADP discount. Wilson would have been a 17 pick reach. So the overall combo of grabbing both would actually be an ADP value loser by grabbing Wilson. And I also just wrote an article about how you shouldn't reach for quarterbacks. So personally,
so you have a brand to uphold. Yes.
Brand uphold.
Dignity. Yeah.
So I passed on Wilson, who was like actually an okay chance of coming back in round 11, but I think would have been a pretty big reach by ADP, certainly in round 10. So instead of taking Wilson, I grabbed Damian Harris, who is correlated with Josh Allen negatively in week 17. I already have this. I should have mentioned I also grabbed Gabe Davis in the seventh. So this is a Josh Allen double with Ramondre Stevenson. Harris, if he scored his touch, I'm like crying if this team's in the final and Harris scores a touchdown. I do not want that. But let's go to structure again. He's my running back 3 in round 10. He's a veteran with a projectable committee role. He's an advance rate play. I've already made a gigantic bet on the Bills. I need that offense to be good. If that offense is amazing, then Damian Harris is probably going to have a pretty good season. He's going to help me advance. Yes. So I'm using the correlation, but now in a different way. I'm saying I want an advance rate play. I want to build out structurally instead of going quarterback 2, which doesn't make a ton of sense structurally here in the 10th round with Josh Allen. I'm going to go with the better structural play. I've skipped 2 obvious correlation plays. I skipped Juju as a bringback. I skipped Russ as a completion of that Denver Chargers stack. Skipped both. But in both ways, I prioritized things that I thought fit better structurally, fit better in terms of player targets, fit better in terms of getting this team to the finals. And I also did get correlation in both picks, a different type of correlation in both, but both ways I think helped me in terms of what I was trying to accomplish. The first gave me a second out, which I didn't end up capitalizing on, but it gave me second out to, potential quarterback and still have this little mini stack. I'm still benefiting. I added Marvin Mims later. Now I'm like, okay, go off Chargers, go off Broncos, go off Russell Wilson. I've got Josh Allen. You're not beating me, right? Like exactly. I've got a double stack with Josh Allen. I'll be fine. Do your thing, Russ. So I'm trying to get as many points into my lineup as possible. Building out additional correlation helps me get there.
See, I love this conversation because this is like all the nerdy shit that I love to think about. But that's why, like, again, this is not Levitan's tweet was totally fine. And frankly, I say similar shit like that all the time because it's the easiest way to explain.
Yeah.
Right. When people ask, what does week 17 correlation mean? Right. What do you prioritize or whatever you do? What Levitan say? I always call it like a decision tree or a totem pole or whatever. Right. If this, then that, if this guy's available way past ADP, but maybe he's not even my top ranked player, that factors in here, this factors in here, blah, blah, blah. Right. They're always just trying to figure out where week 17 kind of lies. And it's never really a straightforward answer, but you just tell people it's kind of a tiebreaker that that resonates. It makes sense. You say, yeah, I prefer Stephon Diggs at this pick. That's a bad example. I prefer, right, my rankings and even my preference say Russell Wilson at this pick, but he doesn't. But there's someone else right there that has correlation with another player on my team, right? And Derek Carr, I'm just making up. I have Chris Olave. I don't have any of Russ's guys, even though I have Russ higher than him. These other things start to break ties in that, and week 17 is one of them. But the dream the absolute dream, which is literally never going to happen to anyone, is you draft 18 players on underdog or 20 players, and every pick checks all of those boxes, right? If we could make a dream draft, you would always get your highest ranked player at every single pick, which of course is not ever
It'd
going
be
to
a
happen.
massive value.
Yeah, he's past ADP.
Justin Jefferson at the 112.
Yeah, exactly. Right. This is what we're talking about. Is it's almost like the if you could get the first 18 picks, would you win or whatever? It's not the same thing, but it's the same premise, right? He would he'd be correlated on this specific team with someone else, whether it's his quarterback or his week 17 game. Right. If we had it,
let's make a best ball DFS lineup.
If we had it our way, that's what would happen. The problem is, it not only does that never happen, you get to every pick and you are literally conflicted on which things I should, stand for on that pick. And I loved the Russ one because it's a little easier with quarterbacks, but the example is so true. You get to Russ and you say, okay, we look at Levitan's list or my own list of all of those things. And you say, let's just say he's your highest ranked player available. I know in this example, he wasn't necessarily, but he's my highest ranked player, right? So this is also the flaw of rankings. Like people just upload rankings and you draft off of rankings. You can really get into trouble doing that too, which shout out to DraftKings. You can actually toggle between rankings and 80. Yes, you can. Oh, they made a lot of upgrades, dude. Like DK is not messing around. The drafting experience still is not amazing, but they've made a lot of really good upgrades. So for people interested in DraftKings, check that out. Also launched a bunch of sweet contests.
They really did.
Anyway, the portfolio of contests on DraftKings is very appealing for best ball players. No matter what you want to play, no matter what payout structure you like, entry fee, single entry, 150 max, everything, they got it all.
Yeah, jump in those because the 44 tournament isn't filling quite as fast as I like.
Yes. So if you like higher stakes, obviously they have the $555 Millie Maker, which is fun because there's $1 million up top. But they have a $250 single entry, I believe, is what it is. That's actually what made me. I was looking into that tournament, and I decided to make a little like contest selector. Basically, it's just a grid that shows you all the details about every best ball contest, and that one is like the dream contest. Almost basically 1% of the entire field make the final, even though it's a small field final. You can get there easily. But first place isn't too much, right? Is this like 20% or something like that to first place? The min cash stuff is good. Like everything, I was like, holy shit, this tournament is absolutely amazing. But I wanted to compare it to like, okay, this seems amazing, but what does it actually look like against every other tournament? And so anyway, I put together this little grid that was pretty cool. It's up on the website. But anyway, the Russell Wilson thing, I have no idea how we got down that path. The Russell Wilson.
That's an amazing tangent. Actually, I loved it.
I know that's me. I'm literally almost done with my
coffee. Riveted.
So that's where it's coming from. Too much caffeine. You get to Russ, right? And if you say use Levitan's list or like your list, and it's literally let's start at 1 and go down to 5, and let's say you start with the ranking or projection. If you just pick that, it actually might be a really horrible pick, right? Because of everything you outlined, you have Josh Allen. Maybe he doesn't correlate in week 17. Maybe he doesn't fit your structure, but he's your highest ranked player. So it's not really like this decision tree where it's so binary at the top. It's actually a bunch of things all playing together. Whereas you reach another point where actually I have a guy ranked higher and that guy does fit my structure. So you might say, well, just take that guy. But the other guy has, right, correlation and week 17, and it's close enough. Maybe he's an ADP value as well, right? Yeah. They're both ADP values. And it's like, okay, I'm getting is a little higher of my like subjective rank of this player. Does that outweigh the all the other stuff? And I mean, I'm not saying I have the right answer because there is not always a right or a wrong answer, but that like putting all the stuff on the scale, like you're putting, okay, let's put this on this side of the scale and let's put this on this side of the scale. You really have to do that balancing act on all those variables on each pick. And I think we do shocker in best ball and fantasy football, we try to make everything seem so easy and straightforward and binary. We want an answer, right? Should I draft a running back or should I draft a wide receiver? Should I draft an elite quarterback or should I draft, late round quarterback? And it's like, just like those, this conversation is, the answer is always like, it depends. It's like almost always the answer is it depends.
It depends, but this is why I think, like, if you're just thinking like, okay, I've got my week 17 bet, I'm going to need the simple, easy thing. The you're not thinking about correlation enough approach to this, in my opinion, is, you reach for Russ, because now it's like, I did it. I checked the box. I have Russ to Cortland Sutton, and you get Marvin Mims. I've got a double stack. That's pretty sweet.
Seems great.
But like, your running back 3 is going to be pretty weak, right? Because it's 11th round or later. You might have to reach for a running back if you don't even feel good about as a result of reaching for Russ. Now you've put this team in, like, it's better optimized for week 17, but it's not actually maybe as likely to get there in the first place, because you had to make some sacrifices.
Or even as strong, because ADP value and ranking and that stuff is projection and all of that, right? The more rounds you move down, the worse the player's projection and ceiling gets, generally, very oversimplified, but generally speaking. And then we know that ADP value is good. So you're sacrificing 2 very important things on that totem pole just to get the correlation.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of a personal take, but I generally think, given quarterback pricing, that if you take Josh Allen in the second round, he better hit your week 17 lineup.
Yeah,
because you don't have a week 17. Your second round pick is dead if Allen doesn't hit your lineup. So, like, not having Russ there, it's more about, well, you don't have a second quarterback to help get you to the playoffs.
right.
Now, it's not impossible that Russ could go off and, you have leverage on these Josh Allen teams. But if you've also stacked up in this team, I had Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis with Ramondre Stevenson. Like, they get there and enough for me to finish first, and Russ is my quarterback. Like, I don't really see it. So it's more about my second quarterback is really providing me with a path to getting to week 17, not week 17 specifically. So therefore, like, what am I really getting except, like, a nice warm feeling from finishing up that single stack with a bring back, when I draft Russ? Instead, I should be thinking about, like, well, if Russ is really just there to help me get to week 17 as my quarterback 2 on a Josh Allen team, maybe there's a better way to help me get to week 17. Maybe taking the running back that's paired with Josh Allen when I need a running back more, that's actually a better move of helping me get to week 17. Maybe Damian Harris goes off in week 15. Josh Allen ends up being underrepresented, in week 17, because a lot of Josh Allen teams got knocked out. He has a quiet week or whatever, right? So that's where I think, like, if you just are trying to check the box with the correlation, then you're probably over correlating. But what I'm saying is, don't not think about it. Think about it even more. Think about who else is correlated.
I like
what can I pivot to? And then I think another thing is, like, one of the things for me, when you talk about, like, all the weighing stuff, and there's a lot to think about, and we know that our brains take shortcuts, right? We get used to stuff. We get comfortable with stuff. And it's like, in this is the round where I draft, like, this guy or this guy or this guy. But like, don't really even think about drafting, like, a tight end here. That's not where I draft tight end. You get, like, kind of in these patterns, happens very naturally. And one of the things that I did in this build is that I had taken Kyle Pitts in the 6th round, which I love. That was just, I think, structurally, there's no correlation reasons to do that. I just think structurally getting what I think is more like a 4th round value in the 6th rounds. It's an amazing build. Historically, it's just getting that elite tight end. It gives you a huge, I wrote a whole article on this. You can check it out on Legendary Upside, but I think it gives you a big edge in best ball tournaments to have a guy who actually has a path to, like, multiple spike weeks. And if those spike weeks happen at the right time, which, you need luck, but if they do, like, you're going to be in really good shape. So I already had Kyle Pitts. I then, later on in the draft, I grabbed Cole Kmet, and Tyler Algier in round 12 and 13. So that formed the grossest little mini game stack. I say in the article, it's probably me 11 total plays in this game. So are you dying to stack up? Are you
This
dying
year's
to stack
this
up?
is this year's Ertz and Algier is this, yeah.
Is Pitts, Komet, Algier.
Komet Algier.
Yeah. Let's take it one step further. Pitts, Komet, Algier. So now here's what I'm saying. I'm like, all right, I need an RB4. He's got contingent value, Algier, right? I grabbed him around 13, which is a good spot to have 4 running backs through those rounds. That's a rule of thumb I used last year. That's something that, again, Hayden's research pointed to. You want to have, looking at making sure you have enough running back investment by that point in the draft. And if Algier is like starting that game, as a contingent play, then it's pretty easy to imagine like it's 2 touchdowns and a run, or 2 tight ends and a running back. It's just they're all touchdown plays. So so I don't need the game to be a shootout. I need all 3 guys to score. I need the offense to be moving efficiently, and there are some touchdowns. So I build in that little mini correlation. Now you could say that it's a silly mini correlation, which it is. It is kind of a silly one, but I went back and looked. I've done, I think, 43 drafts to this point, and I had Cole Kmet on just one other team. And when I say these are my post NFL drafts, mostly puppy, I think I have like 9 BBM teams done. But I'm like not low on Cole Kmet. He's not like a major target for me, but he's just not. I'm actually above ADP on him in my ranks, but I drafted him twice in 43 teams. And if I didn't draft him in this draft as part of this silly correlation, I would just been once on one puppy team.
Yep.
That stuff happens to me all the time. And when I'm trying to manage exposures, which is, I think, another key element here, it's maybe not blocking and tackling for a given draft, but certainly for mass entering best ball tournaments over entire summer, you want to be able to manage your exposures. I mean, you guys have a whole company built out. With
literally the premise behind this company, is like, I don't know how many teams I drafted with Cole Kmet on them. Feels like I should know that if I'm going to draft thousands of dollars of best ball teams.
100%. So it's like if I'm feeling like, man, yet again, here's a guy who I don't dislike, but I found myself being pretty underweight on, then correlation becomes a way of just like getting me off the beaten path, right? Because we tend to find these little pathways through the draft that we feel comfortable with. There's a million things that we have to think about. And so if I know this one works, you end up doing it more than, trying to think through, wait, can I go here? What does the rest of my draft look like? How do I navigate it from here on out? But saying, okay, you know what? I already have a Falcon. I'm going to grab a Bear, and then I'm going to grab another Falcon. That created this little thing. It put me on a Kmet team, which I want Kmet teams. That's if you told me how many Kmet teams you want, you'd be like, I don't know, pretty even with the field slightly more. It's like, well, you have one. It's like, oh, okay then, like that. So I just think it helps. It's actually like another example where the correlation here, it fit with structure, right? I got my tight end 2. I'm done at tight end. Pitts, Kmet, done. Saves me a roster spot. Don't need a tight end 3. I get my 4th running back in kind of exactly the round where I would like to make sure I have a 4th running back by. I like Algier. I like Kmet. I got them both at slight ADP discounts. So everything, checking boxes. But I don't think I get on that without the correlation because I just, for whatever reason, wasn't drafting a lot of Kmet.
Yeah. And that can be what I found a lot. We're in a little bubble. This happens all the time. But like you said, your brain is taking shortcuts. And we hear all the time about which you somewhat debunked, right? Tight end sucks. And it does, but just maybe not in the way
part of
that
the appeal. It's part of the appeal of elite tight end is the tight end sucks. It's because they're like, one guy has
if it all sucks,
two good games and it's amazing.
Yeah, if it all sucks, I don't even need George Kittle to be that good, and he's one of the only guys that can be that good. So that's very valuable. But But so just thinking about the Komet thing, I'm not saying you did this, but it just reminds me, because it definitely happens to me. All these things happen to everybody. No one is perfect, no matter how many best ball teams you draft. We're human, but you'll fall into this. Well, tight end sucks. So if I don't get Kelsey, and maybe you even still like the elites, right? You're like, no, Pat's right. If I don't get Kelsey or Kittle or Andrews or whatever, I'm just going to punt it off, right? And then especially if I got the elite tight end, right? If I got Kyle Pitts or TJ Hawkinson, even, I'm not just whatever 18th rounder as my second guy, right? It's and again, from a macro view, in that vacuum of this idea of tight end, that is fine. That is
It's totally
perfectly
Yeah.
reasonable.
Punting off all
But
three, I think, can work. Like, there's a lot of different
100%.
paths at tight end.
But again, you get a sort of one track mind, right? That's a shortcut. You're like, I know in my brain, tight end past the elite guys, who gives a shit? So I'm just going to wait forever, right? And we know wide receivers got pushed up. We know quarterbacks got pushed up. So I don't like any of those guys back there. So I'm just going to default to tight end. And you just keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it. Even though you have Cole Kmet, whatever, 9 spots ahead of ADP in your rankings, you never get there with him, because you always have this thing in your back. Yeah, you just don't take a tight end there. And again, in a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm not taking tight ends in this range. But when you're building out an entire portfolio, and you have, again, it's about this weighing of all these variables. Like if you had Cole Kmet 25 picks past ADP, right, or 25 picks below his ADP in your rankings, you hated him. You hate whatever, the Bears, right? You have all these different things that, and the correlation wasn't there. Of course you wouldn't get Cole Kmet, right? Like I'm not getting Dawson Knox as an example. He keeps really plummeting, so maybe I will eventually.
I am getting him
now. But up until this point, I haven't drafted any Dawson Knox because I've had him ranked at like 175 or something like that since they drafted Dalton Kincaid, and he was going 3 rounds before that. So naturally I wouldn't get him. But this example, you're like, just because of kind of this one thing, that's again going back to this how we're balancing all these things, and it's not a decision tree, is I can't just be focused on what I think about the tight end position, which is also part of this, right? This is something nobody ever talks about. They talk about positional allocation, but they don't talk about what does the tight end landscape look like? What is the tight end player pool, right? When Travis Kelce retires, we can't treat tight end the same position, like the exact same way as we have for the last 10 years or 8 years or whatever, when the best fantasy tight end of all time no longer exists and is in the player pool, right? Now we're not there, so who cares? But like Kyle Pitts, right? When Kyle Pitts got drafted, he is something that we've almost never seen. Almost. We've had first round tight ends, we've had great tight end prospects, but he was very unique. So you can't just treat the player pool as the historical data or what happened last year, right? And again, those things are not wrong. It's just that we could keep stacking up all these things that you need to weigh. And I'm glad you brought up exposures, because that was one that I was going to bring up. Shocker. It's clearly a passionate subject of mine, but that becomes part of the decision-making process as well. And it could be, you could be like Pat and you could say, I really don't know why I don't have this guy, which happens all the time. I think people really misunderstand how frequently, like, even if you are a guy who doesn't care about individual player exposures, right? You are Felix, who won the Millie 2 years ago. You're Liam, who, won the Millie, just like, give me 70% of my favorite guys. You still will not get like other players with those guys as frequently as you think that they will, or you will not get, right? I love Josh Allen. I'm going to draft all the Josh Allen stacks. You're going to get a lot less of, say, Josh Allen to Dalton Kincaid stacks than you think you're going to, even if you draft a ton of that guy. And so it has to play a part somewhere in this process. And that absolute exposures are what people, once it's over and we flip over the cards, you post them on Twitter and you say, here's my favorite players. They should be like a part of the whole process, the whole way. Right. And
not because otherwise you're scrambling at the end and you're just like blasting guys into teams. Like, I need more of this guy. And that's not thoughtful, right? You're not like building out. So this is a way, I think, correlation becomes, with the exposures, a way of thoughtfully building more of these guys into your portfolios. And like, to me, like, I wish I was thinking about this week 17 stuff back in, was it 2020, or when did Cooper Kupp have his massive breakout
Yeah.
season? Was that 2020 or
2021.
2021?
2021.
Yeah. So I was like, that was one of those ones where I was like, I was drafting wide receivers all the time in this range. I liked Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't like him quite as much as like DJ Moore or whoever else, T. Higgins, whoever else was going in that range, right? I didn't like him quite as much, but I liked him. He was not a fade for me, and I ended up underweight. And I'm like, dude, you had enough wide receiver picks in that range to have plenty of Cooper Kupp. How did you blow this?
Right.
And to me, it's like week 17 correlation is one of the ways that you're making sure you're not blowing that. And you're not just like, you don't just find out, you don't just like wake up in mid-August and you're like, I'm in Cooper Kupp. I got to get more, I got to get more. So you just like, you're going, hey, in this case, I drafted Saquon Barkley. So now Cooper Kupp's a terrible example because he's so expensive. But let's say there's that guy on the fourth, fifth type of range where you feel like you don't have enough of. You can break ties to that player. Oh, I got Breece Hall. I'm going to get Amari Cooper. I don't like drafting Amari Cooper. He's not my favorite guy to draft, but I don't consider him a mega fade. And his ADP is pretty high, and he fell past ADP here. And I got Breece at a discount. And now maybe I can do a Browns Jets thing or a Jets Browns thing. If I could always tack on Lazard and make this a Rodgers thing, right? I could tack on Conklin at tight end, and build out like a pass catcher double stack with Breece Hall helps me get there or whatever. Or I could take it from the Cleveland side as well. So, doing that, but like, hey, let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say you don't get Rodgers or Watson, and it's just this little mini correlation. At least it's a thoughtful way where you got an Amari Cooper share who you just don't like clicking. You just don't like clicking Amari Cooper. He's just not that fun, but you don't intend to fade him, right? If you do intend to fade him, by all means, right? And I think like you talk to like Liam and stuff, he knows like what he's planning to do. It's draft every Bill, and everyone who's ever talked to the Bills, and DeAndre Hopkins says he might be a Bill. He's very intentional with his approach. It's not random. He's not like, oh, I have all these giant stands and how did this happen? No, he's going in saying, I'm comfortable taking stands. I'm comfortable hammering Gabe Davis a couple years ago because I think he's such a value. That's the way I like to play best ball. It doesn't, and that's fine. If that's the way you want to approach it, it's going to raise your variance, but this is a high variant game. And if you happen to be right, like you're giving yourself a chance of binking one of these top prizes, which he obviously has. So you can go that route. But I would just say, make sure you're going that route. Make sure you're fading a guy with a huge amount. You really haven't drafted any of them. That was something you thought about ahead of time and executed on, rather than like, oh crap.
So, and that is so true. The part about make sure you kind of know, and I think that might be the thesis of all of this. Is that why we need to weigh all these million different things, and why it's so hard, frankly, is because people kind of start at the end, right? They say, I want to get, and I'm not saying taking player stands or whatever is wrong. I take more player stands than some of our other people in our space, not to the extent of like Liam and Felix and stuff, where like literally every draft, like you said, is a Bill, or the guy's first name is William. That I don't take it.
I'm a player stands guy too. I actually do want to have my stands, but I just want to make sure they were all intentional, which they sometimes they aren't, unless I look at it and fix it.
And this is what I love to do with pumping our draft IQ tool. But in terms of making sure that my teams are as intended, right? I also have strategies that I want to employ. Some of them are player takes, right? It's all these things: player takes, historical data, right? Roster construction, this year's player pool, blah, blah, blah. All that shit plays into what your strategy is, and everybody should kind of define it for themselves. Or of course you can listen to us or other smart people, and if you want to get some insights. But I go into the tool in just one really basic way is you can go to your like exposure page, and the exposure page is just absolutely everything about all your teams, depending on, if you're clicked on one individual tournament or all your teams, so it tells you your structures, it tells you your players, tells you your stacks, tells you your week 17 stacks. But then I like to dig in to like, let's look at a player. Like, right. We look at a player. If I were Liam, or so why Felix won the Millie 2 years ago is because Cooper Cup was one of his stands. I believe he had 75% Cooper Cup on DraftKings.
Good year for 75% Cooper Cup.
Pretty good. pretty good. But then I would go in and I would say, okay, that's part of my strategy as I'm taking a stand on Cooper Cup, but that's not my only strategy for all of best ball, right? I prefer to lean more zero running back. Maybe I totally love what Pat's saying about elite tight end. I want to be a little heavier on elite tight end, right? And maybe there are some specific other players I'm also taking a stand on. I can plug in that player, Cooper Cup, and now it's going to show me what all my Cooper Cup teams look like. And you'll quickly be like, damn, I drafted 50% Cooper Cup, and let's say my second highest owned player is Najee Harris, again, using like a Felix example. Like, those are my two highest owned players, but I only have 5 Cooper Cup and Najee Harris teams together, right? Those were 2 pillars of my strategy, and I don't have them together. That seems wrong, right? As opposed to you get to the end of the year and you flip over the cards and everybody, right, we'll all do it. You post your exposures on Twitter and everybody's like, oh my God, you took a big stand.
You'll find out that everyone's exposures are bad. Sorry to everyone. They're all bad.
Yes, exactly. Have you ever, I've never seen anyone post exposures where all the replies were like, oh, awesome. I totally
I wish
agree.
Those were my exposures. Nah, like, those suck. Here's mine.
Yes, it is the epitome of like doom scrolling and hate. The hateful hate is a more powerful. Yes, it shows you how much hate is a more powerful emotion than joy and happiness, because everybody's just like fucking idiot, just like scrolling down. You like Najee, idiot. You like Gabe Davis, moron. Don't you know? Gabe Davis, he sucks. Like, it's just all people, but. Like, you can look and see, right? Are you specifically implementing your strategy, or you can figure out maybe you haven't even set that strategy, right? Right? Like Pat likes some player takes, and he's got this, elite tight end and correlation and stuff. You can figure out if you're implementing it correctly, and no one does that. Like I said, it just like hit me almost this week, was like our assessment as an industry of what someone's like takes are in terms of strategy for the year is when we screenshot our exposure pages.
Although it would be probably more of like screenshotting that draft IQ type thing, where it's like, here's how many elite tight end teams I built, elite quarterback teams I built, all the running back structures and all that stuff. Plus, because I mean, it is more that ultimately is like what we're doing is as Legendary Sickos here is that we're drafting a bunch of these teams. So it does ultimately boil down to like a portfolio management exercise 100%. At some point. Yep. And you are going to find out, like, I love these two guys and they're not as paired together as I'd like. Maybe you're going to, just for the sake of fixing that, maybe you are going to draft or just keep your eye on seeing if you can naturally like draft a couple of those guys together. But I think what this does is it, with correlation in general, it's going to help you just minimize the amount of those types of things that you find. And it might also help you minimize the opposite, where you're like,
yes,
these guys are together like a lot and they're not correlated. They just happen to take them. And I happen to take this guy in the 3rd a lot. I happen to take this guy in the 6th a lot. And, like I drafted a ton of Traylon Burks in the pre-draft period. And I still like him. But I'm probably like less exposed to Traylon Burks now, in part because when I get to that part of the draft, I'm like, well, there's some correlation here that I can work with. I don't just have to hammer the same guy. And in my pre-draft teams, like, hopefully the Titans and the Colts have good week 17s, because I'm pretty sure I have a lot of like Anthony Richardson and Traylon Burks paired together. That doesn't help. It doesn't help correlation wise, but Godspeed. But like, you're going to find a lot of that stuff in your portfolio if you're not using correlation at all, because again, you will take shortcuts just naturally, right? As much as we're we're sort of on the machine end of the man versus machine battles here, but still using a human brain to do all this stuff.
Yep.
You will just kind of land on the same answers a lot, because that's how our minds work.
It really is because there's so many different benefits to it, right? We clearly know that the week 17 correlation is at worst, not hurting you, right? It's what I think Leone called it last year or 2 years ago. Even he was like, I think you guys are carried away here, but at worst, it's a free roll. Meaning, if you correlate, assuming all else equal, right? Assuming you didn't do something stupid, you did the blocking and tackling. You didn't do that wrong. What does it hurt you? You're not building in, it's not like drafting a guy 6 rounds ahead of ADP where we can probably say with good confidence that's hurting you. You're just siding with a player who happens to correlate in the most important week. Even if you think that that's meaningless, it's at worst a free roll. At best, which is I agree more with you that there's a lot of huge benefits, particularly in best ball, NFL best ball, really most best ball, where it's like, dude, this happens one time a year. I need to pull every goddamn lever and it's really top heavy. Like this is DFS.
That's the other thing I talked about in this article is that there's more regular season money up front, but if you look at how that money is actually paid out in the regular season, $2.25 million is paid out in $250 increments, right? So, I mean, at most, if you just absolutely crush it, what's 150 times 250? This 37,500. So that's pretty good. That's all of your teams finish in that range, which is impossible. But let's say you did it. Nice, great job. But
that's the new goal.
That would be way more impressive, actually.
I would like to do that for the bit equity rather than finish first or whatever, because that would be amazing.
Something I think far more impressive than finishing first in Best Ball Mania 4 pays out 37,500. It would finish, let's say some of those teams finish higher. I'm saying all of your teams finish between 1,000th and 10,000th place. 1,000th and first and 10,000th place.
Which is nearly a top 1% team, by the way, for anybody that's I also looked at this, and it's like a top 1.5% team.
Yeah.
Just to get the 250, you have to have a 99th percentile, 98th percentile team in the regular season.
Right. So you do that with all of your teams. I mean, that's amazing. Obviously, there are some bigger prizes up top, but last year, top prize, $2 million. Regular season top prize, $1 million. Twice as high. This year, top prize, $3 million. Regular season prize down to $500,000. It's now 6 times as big. So in my mind, we're playing more for the regular season. Why? The money is 6 times higher if you finish first in week 17. The issue is if you don't finish first in week 17, it drops off massively. It's only $300,000 for third, right? So you really do want to finish at the very worst second, which is $1 million. But obviously we are playing for first place. So it's it's hard to get to week 17. You have to advance, then you have to finish first out of 16. First out of 16 again. If you're just a totally average drafter, you're basically expected to advance one team to the finals as a max entered drafter once every 10 years. That's kind of how the math works out. So it's really, really tough to even make the finals, but this is not a we're just happy to be there situation. Once you get to the finals, you do want to have pulled all the levers so that if a couple things break your way in terms of the games that you bet on, you actually vault all the way to the top of the standings and finish first. Because if you look at the regular season prizes or the week 17 prizes, I mean, if you finish 51st, which is pretty amazing in a 441 team field that it was a huge accomplishment even to advance to in the first place. That's $5,000, which is a nice payout. Certainly covers the max entering cost of $3,750, but quite a bit lower than $3 million. So you really do. It's not about finishing well in week 17. It's about finishing first. in week 17. So like these like little micro edge levers and stuff, I just think they matter a ton. I think they matter a ton because of the way that the prize structure just, I mean, exponential, I think almost undersells the
It
way
does.
these payouts work.
It absolutely does. Think about, like you just said, you finish 40th or whatever. There's almost 700,000 teams in the tournament. Like, think about what that means. What an accomplishment. Hey, like you said, it's the hardest BBM we're talking about specifically for anybody on Underdog. It is significantly harder to advance in Best Ball Mania 4 than any other tournament. The most difficult other advancement structures are on DraftKings, and they are basically everywhere is 2 out of 12 advance out of the regular season, pretty much everywhere. And then the most difficult on DraftKings, no matter, pick a tournament, is 1 out of 12 advance in both week 15 and week 16. BBM is 33% harder than that in each of those rounds to advance. On top of that, advancing out of your, it used to be you would make at least like $10 if you advance to the playoffs. You just get your money back advancing out of the playoffs unless you have that top 1%, 1.5% regular season team, right? So like the extent to which you have to finish high in this, even to like pipe dream about getting your money back, right? Like you just said finished. So you mean I have to finish 2 out of 12, 1 out of 16, 1 out of 16. Then I have to finish in the top 50 just to not lose money in that tournament. That is,
well, top 100. You get 5,000. Yeah. And I suppose there are the odds that you actually lose money if you finish 200th, which would get you 3,250, are pretty low because you probably got some other stuff along the way. But yeah, you're kind of like you finish 101st, and it's like, all right, back at it again next year. Got my money back.
Right. You should be so excited about that. Like, think about the math of how difficult it is, like you just said, to get there, how unlikely it is to get there, and then to finish that high in this, million team tournament. That is incredible. And like you said, what you're probably thinking is disappointed. You're disappointed, and you're like, God damn, I can't wait till 2024. I can't wait till 2024 to start trying this again. So, but like, what does all this like silliness means is you should be doing everything you can to attack first, because almost nothing else matters. It's the only thing that matters. Like, it's actually bigger than that. It is, why is week 17 the only thing that matters? It's because the top couple places are the only thing that matters in a massive tournament. The only other thing I was going to say on that is, outside of drafting, say, overlapping bye weeks at quarterback, or drafting maybe like Jameson Williams, right? Or Alvin Kamara if he gets suspended, or something, DeAndre Hopkins last year. Outside of that, you can draft teams for the week 17, the playoff top prize, and still be extremely plus EV on the season long side too. Like, you can have your cake and eat it too. It's just, I would never, if I'm going to make a sacrifice, your point is perfect. There's 10 total $1 million on one side and 5 total $1 million on the other. And then there's a $3 million top prize and a $500,000 top prize on the other. And 2 out of 12 teams at least get their money back on the other side versus 99% of teams don't get any money on the other side. Which one are you going to plan for? Like, that seems pretty damn straightforward to me, which one I want to plan for, especially when I can still make teams that can win on one side. I just want to prioritize the other side more.
Yeah, and I feel for, I don't know if Josh and Hayden were lobbying saying, listen, this week 17 stuff, we got to get back to player takes. What are we doing? Because I honestly think this makes the week 17 stuff matter more, because you have to finish first in week 17. That's like, you've got to be pulling every lever to make sure that your team bubbles up to the very top. Because if you finish, it just matters so much more that you actually do take down one of the top prizes. So what I would say too is there are other structures, and 1 in 12 doesn't sound like a huge difference, compared to 1 in 16, but as I said, like your odds of or your expected finals showing would be once every 10 years as a totally average max enter drafter in Underdog, Best Ball Mania 4. But that 1 in 12, 1 in 12 structure takes it to 1 every 6 years. So it's actually 5.7. So it's actually slightly better than 1 every 6 years. So that is meaningfully better. Now it's still not great, but it's still meaningfully better. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, because this is something on this particular team that I outlined, I actually did kind of potentially sacrifice some week 17 upside. Maybe I want to get your thoughts on it. Because what happened is, so I didn't take that Russ stack that I talked about. I went with Damian Harris instead.
Yep.
Yeah. So I got boxed out of the quarterback 2. Now, you got maybe some other options, right? You go through. Could I have gotten like a Jordan Love and then tacked on a Jaden Reed and maybe? But I don't. And then what am I doing with the Minnesota side of that? Am I going to do something silly there? My KJ Osborne's probably already gone. Dwayne McBride, is that maybe how I try to get some? So I could have tried to piece something together with that. What I did instead is, when I got to the late rounds, I took some guys that I thought, were good closing line value types of picks. But then I also, in the final 3 rounds, I took Mac Jones as my quarterback 2. I got Tyquan Thornton, and I got Marvin Mims, who built out my other stack that I got boxed out. Oh no, this stack didn't work. No. I'm still betting on that game. So I took Marvin Mims. If Russ has a good game and Josh Allen has a good game, amazing. That's exactly what I want. And I need Josh Allen to have a good game, or otherwise I'm not doing anything anyway in week 17.
Mm-hmm.
So Russell Wilson going off as well is something I'm actually hoping happens, even though I didn't draft him. So, but Mac Jones plays Josh Allen in week 17. I only have one realistic out, right? I actually then, after drafting Mac Jones, or just before, no, I took Hardy with my last pick. So after drafting Mac Jones, I am continuing to bet on Allen. And I've now got 3 wide receivers paired with him. Mac Jones is not hitting my week 17 lineup unless something has gone terribly wrong. So it creates a situation where now I only have 1 out to a high-end week 17 outcome. My thinking on this is, I spent my second round pick on Allen. By building in the Jones stack, where I took Tyquan Thornton in the 16th round, that's actually an additional bring back for Allen. And I also benefited from another little bonus correlation, which someone was kind enough to tag us in after we talked about the super sicko spreadsheets that would be developed to come up with these bonus correlations. I did benefit here because Broncos Chargers pairs with Patriots Bills. The Bills play the Chargers in week 16 and the Patriots play the Broncos. So in this case, I actually kind of like it. I kind of like it because I get a true game stack quarterback doubled with a pass catching running back and a wide receiver. Double bring back with Marvin Mims and Cortland Sutton. And then on the other side, I've got this Josh Allen triple stack with wide receivers. Damian Harris, your time is over. You can chill. Thanks for helping us get there. But that's brought back with Mike Williams on the Chargers side. So now they kind of break apart and form these 2 week 16 game stacks. Who knows? Maybe it is Damian Harris week, and Mac Jones gets me through with that double bring back on the Denver side. And he throws a couple touchdowns to Tyquan Thornton. Let's go. Make the finals. Now Josh Allen is my only out, but that's fine. You spent a second round pick on him. So that's kind of how I was thinking through that. But it is like admittedly gross to only have 1 quarterback out, but at least there's kind of this additional bonus correlation that you're getting with that combo.
I totally agree. So first of all, this is a perfect thing to start to wrap with, because
we saved this for the end of the show.
This is fucking
this is where people are just pulling out their God damn it.
this is mental. If people thought week 17 talk was bad last year, this is true padded cell mental illness. But if you think I haven't thought about this, you are sadly mistaken, because I absolutely have. So it's also actually very fitting, because it really is everything we talked about, that you're putting all these things on a scale and seeing which side goes down, right? Because the quarterback thing is competing against these other ideas, and not in the lens that most people would say, oh, well, the bye weeks don't cross over. You didn't spend too much capital on Mac Jones to go with Josh Allen. Seems fitting, right? But you're like, yeah, but that week 17 thing, I do think, again, in a vacuum, it reminds me of the tight end conversation we were talking about earlier. In a vacuum, yeah, if I don't get one of the elite guys, let's punt that baby off. Like, what's the difference between, who was it? Herzig posted, what's the difference between Hayden Hurst and Dalton Schultz? Like, whether you agree or disagree with that, I understand what he's saying. What's the difference? So, like, yeah, in a vacuum, right? In a vacuum, I don't want my quarterbacks to be in the same game in week 17. Like you said, it is really limiting I've now made one bet. The whole point of all the correlations.
I made one bet now. Yeah.
The whole point of all the correlations is I make a few different bets, right? Like you did with your team. You hit on both of them somehow. Absolute madness with Tom Brady and Daniel Jones. But you made those two different bets. It gave you these two different paths, and it happened. It just so happened they both hit, right? But most of the time, that's not what happens. Is
one hits.
One guy scores 16, the other guy scores 35, and then of course he brings along, right? Tom Brady brings along Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and everybody, and then DJ Moore on the other side. And so we know we're not going to use all 18 picks, but we set ourselves up to hit on one of 3 or 4 different scenarios. Once you pull that quarterback into the same game with the other one, you still got your outs, like you said, with the Chargers and Broncos, and like the team's not dead.
Don't forget about the Falcons and Bears.
But yeah, don't forget about Cole Kmet hopefully hitting your flex. That's what we're really rooting for.
Yeah,
we're
crushing it.
Yeah, exactly. While Kyle Pitts needs to score 30 and Tyler Algier scores 25 and Cole Kmet scores 26 or 24.
Hey, at that point, Cole Kmet can take the day off. I'm good.
Right. But it really is kind of the perfect like sicko summary of this whole thing that we're talking about, because in a vacuum, I don't think you want that second quarterback in that same game. But once we start to unpeel the onion, you see like, well, actually, right, it fits my structure. We were talking about the structure thing. I don't want to overspend on it fits my Levitan called it, like positional capital allocation or something like that, right? It fits that because I just punted off QB2 with Josh Allen. I have correlation with Mac Jones and Tyquan Thornton and Ramondre. I have the really sicko stuff, like you're talking about week 15, week 16, right? I have those. Also, you really want to get crazy with it. I mean, the Patriots are in the same division as the Bills. You get another correlation. You get
Plus,
another correlation.
I happen to draft a Chief who happened to play the Patriots. This is total just luck box into this, but Rashee Rice bring back in week 15.
Right. But like we know inherently that game stacks are really good. I do think that's a level. I'm not going to be like, breaking ties with week 1 game stacks or anything. But like, no. I think that there is a level to again, there's just a bunch of.
But John Jackson he put out his list on Twitter, and he was saying divisional correlation is low on his list, but it is on his list because if we want to be live to finish, and I would say, look, I mean, the team that King Cap's team had a lot of these quarterback running back correlations. I've got Mac Jones with Ramondre. I've got Josh Allen with Damian Harris. I also bet on the Broncos to be good, So I did do some at the Falcons, like Bijan doesn't have this great season and Algier plays a lot or whatever. There's actually like regular season EV that you're building in when because I did at least have the quarterback stacked. I think that's the big difference for me. It's like, well, what was I supposed to do when I get sniped on Russ? Do I just tack on another quarterback, hope to build it out later because I don't want to have these two guys in the same game? Well, in some cases, maybe yes, because I don't just want to only have bet on Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins. I do want to have a second out in week 17. But I think in this case, what I ended up feeling is like there's enough other benefits from having Mac Jones here with the stacking, with the pairs with the other games, where I'd rather have that and lose a little bit of the Week 17 juice. Because let's face it, I already bet on Josh Allen to do it. Josh Allen
And
has to do it anyway.
that's exactly what my last point was going to be. Was I do think it can become more of a conversation, right? If you have like a late round QB type build where your first quarterback is Derek Carr or something, right? Derek Carr versus Mac Jones is Derek Carr projects a little bit better, but much closer to a coin flip. And you didn't invest much into Derek Carr. So I think again, there's no right or wrong, but I think in that scenario, it's a lot different than Josh Allen. You said it earlier and nailed it. If you draft a quarterback in the second round, fella, and you stacked him with a first round pick and a 7th round pick, if he fails, exactly how are you winning this tournament, right? So your first round pick failed, your second round pick failed, your 7th round pick failed. Like you're probably not going to win this one, right? You need the big game because that's how much you spent on that guy. It's different, right? If you have Derek Carr and Mac Jones and Jimmy Garoppolo, like you are kind of just saying, let's throw all these guys into the box and shake it up. And one of them's going to hopefully turn out, with 28 points in week 17. And so in that scenario, I think I would probably be like, assuming everything else is the same, assuming the other things that we're weighing don't trump this. But I think in that scenario, I would say I do probably want to lean away from it. But with Josh Allen, Mac Jones is
don't take Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield. Don't do that.
Yes. Yeah, you're not getting anywhere. You're not getting anywhere with that. All you're doing is not raising your ceiling and just tanking your odds of finding the right quarterback. Because the thing about the quarterback stuff is it never works this way, right? Sometimes running backs can just be the guy that score a bunch of touchdowns. Joe Mixon famously had the 5 touchdown game this year. Kamara did it for Herzig, with 4 or 5 touchdowns a few years ago. And so what's up with these guys that score 5 touchdowns in a game, like trying to go to prison, by the way? Apparently that if you score 5 touchdowns, you're going to act a fool.
Red flag.
Yes. Big time red flag. So don't draft anybody that's maybe you're projecting to score 5 touchdowns in a game. But
you heard it here first. Great advice.
Yes. Don't draft the really good players. Draft the guys that don't score as many fantasy points. If you looked at my exposures, that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, by the way. Like quarterbacks holding clipboards on the sideline has typically been my strategy. But so you're drafting for this. Now I goddamn distracted myself. But the whole to put a bow on the quarterback thing is like Mac Jones is this play on the regular season and the additional correlation and all these other things that we're weighing. And that Josh Allen thing, that 2nd round pick, that Josh Allen nugget outweighs all the other shit. Like if you throw everything, not in the garbage, right? But again, we're weighing this. Josh Allen's this huge boulder. When you put it on the scale, Josh Allen's this huge boulder. All those other things are a bunch of pebbles. Sometimes the pebbles will be heavier than the boulder, but like in this instance, it's like there's a couple pebbles over here, and then there's Josh Allen, this heavy ass rock on the one side, and so you have to lean that way.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, I don't like it, and I don't like it, and this is hardly a perfect team, It's just but I outlined the team because I think it was a sort of a fun team in terms of the way that I built out this correlation throughout the draft and in different ways, and that's fundamentally like what I'm trying to outline here is that like I'm not just focused on correlating this thing I already built. It's like, hey, instead of chasing Juju, who I don't like and is not an ADP value, let me start to maybe I do get Russell Wilson past ADP, right? Maybe I even the next round I'm like, you know what? I still don't in the 11th. I'm actually going to see if I can scoop him in the 12th because there's a guy that I like in the 11th. I'm going to push it a little more. And because I think I can recover from this, I think I'll be okay if I punt off my quarterback 2 because I have Josh Allen, right? So that's like that structural decision still making huge impacts on what I'm doing later in the draft. But, helping me avoid what I think would have been a mistake to go with Juju is correlation, is another correlation guy popping up and saying, hey, I'm an ADP value. You like me better than Juju, and I correlate with Mike Williams. It's like, boom. Let's go with that. That sounds way more fun. And it gives you a chance of like building out more of a super team if you then were able to get Russell Wilson at a discount. or what have you. I mean, and I think, frankly, the fact that I have 2 Broncos and a Charger, that is a game that could absolutely shoot out. And it's a game that could shoot out, and you still want Josh Allen because Josh
100%.
Allen's just that good. And so if you have Josh Allen stacked up and another game stacked up, I mean, I've done stuff where I have Jalen Hurts, and I will like aggressively attack the Chargers receivers as if I drafted Herbert. Like you got to watch out. I'll be in there sniping your Chargers receivers because I'm like, you have to decide between Mike Williams and Keenan Allen as a Herbert drafter. I don't. I can draft both those guys. I can get Quentin Johnston if I want. And the way the Eagles line up with the Chargers, like I could just come in and sweep up the Chargers, bring back a Bronco. Maybe I just bring back Mims or whatever. Or maybe I do P. Ryan and Mims and get something like that or whatever I decide to do. I get a whole nother game stack. Plus, I'm like, I've got Hurts. So Hurts is going to go nuclear in week 17. I'm afraid of Russell Wilson. If I've got Hurts and he went nuclear, I'm not afraid of Russell Wilson. I'm not afraid of even Justin Herbert if I've got Jalen Hurts. So I'm using the correlation to actually give me more options, right? And by the way, in that same situation, if Russell Wilson were to fall to me at a value, and I already have this Chargers Broncos thing built up, and of course, you don't have to pick that game. You can pick any number of games, and you can let the draft kind of pick those games for you in some respect. But that's how you end up building a team that like a couple games go off, and it's like, dude, yeah, maybe Herbert was the highest scoring quarterback on the week, but Allen scored 2 points less, and you had all Herbert's receivers.
Yep.
You want to be a Herbert team or an Allen team? Because I want to be an Allen team because I got him stacked. Plus I stole Herbert's points as well.
Yep. I love that, the kind of stacking without the quarterback and the meta of secondary correlations and mini correlations and main stacks and game stacks, all of that. Maybe that's something we'll get into, whether it's next week or sometime here in the future, because that's really, really fun, I think. And that's where, again, this is another one of those things you got to figure out during that draft, right? Is like, yeah, sometimes you are just going to have the traditional, I drafted this guy with 2 of his wide receivers and the bring back on the other side or something like that. And then sometimes you are going to have like, I just got Hurts and Devonta Smith, and now just give me all these Chargers and give me all these, right? Like you said, again, Liam, a couple years ago, Joe Burrow was the highest scoring quarterback, but Liam had Jamar Chase. And so, Allen came close enough. Allen was like 8. It was like 8 points or something like that.
Burrow was replaceable. Chase was not. That's generally, exactly. I mean, I have this whole article on the site as well. This one's completely for free about daring people to snipe my quarterbacks, and the whole concept is just a blustery. I'm just getting worked up unnecessarily about.
You are up there shaking your finger on the stage at people.
I'm not shaking my finger. Yeah, I'm just belligerent. I'm just saying, come do it. Yeah, but the simple point is that quarterback's the most replaceable position. Even the spike weeks separate from the other quarterbacks less. So it's like. You had to have Chase. You didn't have to have Burrow. And that happens all the time. That happens all the time. And especially with 18 roster spots or 20 roster spots, it's more likely to happen. You just need to get sufficient quarterback points in there. You can do that in a number of different ways. This isn't to say not to draft the elites. I think the elites are pretty interesting, but it's just to say you can stack without the quarterback very, very easily. And I think it's something you want to be doing. I think you want to be trying to do that in basically every draft. You want to have stuff without the quarterback.
You said it perfect. Like the great way to summarize it for me is almost like the correlation stuff is a way to avoid mistakes. Of course, there are perks to the correlation, but by siding with the correlation, you can avoid a lot of mistakes. One of them being by caring about, speaking of mistakes, by getting these 2 psychopaths. Was clearly one of the mistakes.
That sounds horrendous, man. Those dogs are really howling.
They are howlers. They're basically werewolves. And so when other dogs in the neighborhood, we're keeping this on.
Talk about correlation, huh? One house, the other house,
correlated howling. The whole neighborhood, dude. It's the whole neighborhood. Everybody has a dog in this subdivision. And so whenever one of them howls, it's like the Christmas trees are lighting up all across the neighborhood. Everybody is just everybody's dogs are going nuts. But it really is just like it's a way to avoid mistakes. You're obviously building in a really helpful thing in week 17, but you're avoiding mistakes like to like a million things that we talked about here, to your portfolio, right? To reaching, to positional allocation, to all these things. You're helping avoid those mistakes. And then like the last point that you said is like, you're avoiding worrying too much about the most replaceable position, right? This correlation angle is getting you away from saying, oh, I got to have this quarterback. It's like, well, no, you can correlate in a little different way. And then you don't have to worry about that because it's replaceable. And so you're avoiding.
Think about it more than just, I need to get my quarterback with this guy. That's thinking about it a normal amount. Think about it way too much. And then you'll think like, well, hang on a second. This other guy correlates here. Just so I don't have the quarterback, it's still correlation. I'm still going to work this and I'm going to work this in. And then you actually are going to build more fundamentally sound teams. You're going to build more thoughtful portfolios. You're not going to have to go to Draft IQ in September and be like, what have I done? You're just going to have a better time.
Absolutely. So I think that's a pretty good wrap. The dogs made an appearance because we can't have a show without my dogs making an appearance. But you got this article coming out that'll be out by the time I'll make sure and link it in the description when this gets posted on YouTube. But anything else that the people need to know about?
There are still some underdog credits available if you sign up for legendaryupside.com at legendaryupside.com/early. You got to fill out a form as well. I'll have that in the description, the page where you can find that form. Those are going pretty quickly, so I would go ahead and do that if you want to sign up. Might want to prioritize that. Put that pretty high on your list. Things to do. You can
higher than your week 17 and higher than your week 15 correlations. That
definitely goes higher than week 15. Definitely higher than week 15. And you can get 40% off your Spike Week subscription. If you're trying to keep correlation in mind, one thing I'll do is I'll like star the guys and put them in my queue to keep track. But there are technology exists to help us keep track of week 17 correlation beyond just risking timing out on Quez Watkins, because you don't want to do that.
Yes, exactly. That is the flaw of the queue strategy. DraftKings doesn't always work, and we're underdog. Sometimes it'll be a little slow to open. And like you said, it's the sixth round, and Quez Watkins is in the top of the queue. That you might have just punted off that team. But yeah, definitely just to reiterate, 40% off of your Spike Week subscription. We have an NFL package. You'll get $120 off of the NFL package. It's actually quite a bit of money, along with the money you're saving over on Pat's side, and it's a pretty seamless fit. So if you're listening to this, you're clearly mentally unwell like we are, which means you're a pretty good fit for the Spike Week tools. Only thing I'll wrap with is part 2 of our How to Win at Best Ball series is coming out later today, both here on this Spike Week YouTube channel or here on the Spike Week YouTube channel if you're listening to this on Pat's channel. And there'll also be a written version. There's going to be a 5-part series. So if you're listening to this again, you're probably a little bit more advanced. But something that's been really helpful for me is like creating these videos and these articles is, as much as we're thinking about these advanced things, kind of going back to the very beginning, like at the beginning of the summer here or before you're going to start drafting, or really at any point, has been kind of helpful, just like as a refresher to be like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about week 15, how many crazy correlations and game stacks am I building in, right? And stacking without the quarterback and all this different stuff. But like the core and basics of the game, right? The rules and manipulating your draft and all that are really the foundation of how we become good best ball players. So 100%. It's been helpful for me, even as a person who's literally thinking about this silly game 100% of the time. So make sure you go check out Pat's latest article, and all the links to everything we talked about here will be in the description, and we will catch you guys next Thursday. See ya.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.